Wait, there's 55.
55.
Schwab.
Oh, we're rolling. So I'm here with Josiah,
Paul Negro,
got Drew McLean,
Aaron Mazzaconi,
Mike Cattell.
Daniel Pasca,
Brett's got his cool car here.
some Bald Eagle valve covers.
One JZ, it makes cool sounds.
So we're out here drifting somewhere that we shouldn't. I've got Drew McLean with his 2JZ 4-door, 4-seated wagon, and he's going to tell us a bit about it. What do you think about the track today, dude?
Track's a blast. It was a lot more fun than I anticipated. It looked fun to begin with, but actually getting out there, it's tight and very technical.
Tight and technical. So tell me a bit about the suspension setup that you've got going on from front to back.
Oh, all right. So pretty much everything on the wagon is a one-off. Well, kind of one-off. So it's a designed and fabricated piece by myself, running aftermarket coilovers, but as far as the actual suspension, the arms, the geometry, everything was done like on CAD and then fabricated by myself.
So you fabricated everything, you designed it, you did the research. Are you familiar with E46s? Like, kind of where'd you get your background in this?
Beamer had a wagon. I wanted a wagon. Beamers drift well. They're stable platforms. They have a ton of mechanical grip. And then, yeah, like the angle kit was a development that I had started a couple years ago, and decided, I was like, hey, I finally have a chassis that I have pieces for.
So one thing that's pretty interesting about your wagon to me is that you decided to get rid of the factory inline six. You didn't really put a V8 in it. It seems like you have a 2JZ.
A late model 2J VVT. So it's essentially a Mark IV Supra motor, but updated. It's got a big agricultural whole set turbo. It's like tractor parts. Stock injectors and a standalone, and it makes a healthy 300 horse.
It just kind of seems like you're running low boost on a really reliable setup. You just want it to be something you can have fun in, and I think the most important part of the car is the 4 seats. So tell us a bit about that. Like, what made you decide to put 4 seats in it instead of leaving it a 2-seater and going the pro route?
Oh, I don't want to compete. Competing sucks. No, for real, like, drifting to me is the same mentality and same atmosphere as a skate park. So why, like, when I went to the park, it's fun to get stoked with all your buddies. You stomp that trick, you land it, like it's awesome. Everybody's stoked. You put 3 other people in the car, they're stoked because you're stomping tricks all day or flying off track.
It's almost like you're doing a BMX trick, but you can take your friends along for the ride. So you can do a bar spin with like 5 of your friends piggyback. That's pretty much the car equivalent of what's going on here. Honestly, to take it back to I think Dub BMX or whatever, they were all about chills, not skills. And I think that kind of mentality is big time reflected in the build of this car. So I think we should go to the inside and talk about like what's going on inside and stuff like that.
Sure, let's have a look.
Cool. All right, so we're going to do this interview in the back of Drew's wagon because I've never been in the back seat of a race car this comfortably. Drew, please tell me about this roll cage. Tell me about what's going on. I know you kind of went on earlier about your philosophy on the sport, but I just think this is pretty fucking cool. I'm just looking at 2 Kenwood speakers, a really long aux cord. Tell me a bit about this.
It's supposed to be accommodating. I've actually never sat back here. Definitely never sat back here like on track.
And what are your first impressions?
I think it'd be wild. It's pretty obscure. Like I've sat in the back of cars drifting, but I've never sat in the back semi-stadium seating with like buckets and harnesses.
So Considering the fact that you have the buckets and harnesses back here, how'd you have to build the roll cage differently?
So essentially from the B pillar forward, it would be the same as a rule book. Loosely followed like top tier Formula Drift. But everything behind, you can't have all the straight members back here. So like they'll penetrate through imaginary chests. And so it's like, oh man. So I guess we'll try and mirror image the front about the main hoop.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of some obscure tubing back here because of headspace and where the seats ended up. But besides that, it's like really crappy Kenwood speakers. I need something better.
I noticed that you have, all right, I'm going to point out some shit that I noticed.
All right.
Brake proportioning valve, is that for the foot brake or the handbrake?
Proportioning valve is actual foot pedal. It's independent braking between handbrake and foot pedal.
So you've got a dual caliper setup for your e-brake?
I do, yeah.
What size master do you have for your e-brake?
5/8. I swear by 5/8.
Swear by 5/8. I am more of a 3/4 guy myself, but tell me why.
Oh, you just like the girth, eh? So, all right, my theory on master cylinders. So, larger bore will be a shorter stroke, but it'll be more effort to actually engage.
Right.
So for me, I would rather quickly and loosely pull the handle further with less effort.
Right.
So on a track like this, or like tracks that have a lot of technical aspects to it, or if you're tight tandems, a lot of corrections and stuff like that, then I'd rather not be pulling harder and pull easier on the handle.
I had a 5/8 master in my car last year, and the first thing I noticed when I switched to a 3/4 master is that the 3/4 master is harder to lock up when you're going slower.
Yes.
When you're going fast, it locks like right up. It's fairly opposite. So I guess this would be a pretty good setup for like tight, shorter tracks, like go-kart tracks where you're kind of in close proximity. You're on and off the e-brake a lot.
Absolutely.
So that's pretty cool. I noticed that you have a Samsung dashboard. Tell me about your management system, what you've got going on there. Did you wire it yourself or did you take it anywhere? I know that you did most of this work yourself, but still tell me about it.
Yeah, apart from the cage, I give all the credit to Mitch. But as far as like everything else, I fabricated and designed. But yeah, as far as the tablet, that's actually my gauge cluster. And it is a Bluetooth piece to the ECU Masters standalone, which that isn't, I wired the entire engine from scratch, one wire at a time.
Okay.
I probably won't do that ever again.
Have you had any issues? That's the real question.
No, it's essentially, I reuse connectors, which is, I was kind of lazy there.
Yeah.
I probably should have got cable ends and like actually did proper like new fresh connectors. But as far as all the wires run, you don't get any of the dry rot like 20-year-old wires and anything like that cause a lot of people headaches, right?
Well, cool. I'm stoked. This interior is pretty sweet. Let's go to the engine and talk about the big agricultural turbo that you've got there.
Okay.
All right, so we're at the front of the car now. We're going to pop the hood and take a look at the 2JZ with the agricultural turbo and whatever other weird lines, fittings, and vacuum things that he's got going on here. So, Drew, why don't you pop the hood for us and let's take a look.
All right.
So I can see why they call this the party wagon. This is pretty serious, man. I don't even know where to start. The first thing I'm probably going to point out is I do not know where your rad is.
It's not here. I just don't bother.
Not bad.
No, it's actually in the back of the car.
So you mounted the rad in the back of the car. I've noticed that you have some pretty big lines and fittings going from, what is that? Top line is water pump.
Nope.
Explain this to me.
Water pump is down below. You'll see the larger -20 line running across the bottom of the rad support, and then they'll actually loop back down and go underneath the car. That's just the upper water neck, and then there's a kind of a bleed fill port there as well, just to help filling the system, because I think it's about 20 liters.
So I noticed, so the rad's in the back and you're running lines from the front of the car to the back of the car. Are you running solid lines underneath the car, or is it the same kind of line that you have up here in the engine bay?
No, it's just soft lines when they come up. So essentially there's probably about 3-4 feet of soft line here, and then that ducts underneath to 1.5 inch hard line, goes back, and then it's soft line that comes up to the rad.
And how's this cooling system been working out for you so far? I know that on go-kart tracks there's not a lot of airflow, and drift cars are always sideways, so not much air actually goes through the front of the car anyway. So how is this holding up for you this year?
Not too bad. It's a pretty simple stock car aluminum rad, single pass. I think eventually I'll cut the end tanks off or slice them and make it a triple pass. See if that makes a difference. I have a really big rad fan that motors, takes about 50 amps startup, but it seems to be doing pretty well. Like it's not nuclear meltdown hot when I come off, and that's after like a half decently long session.
Not bad, not bad. So I want to get into this oil cooling system. I noticed you have a little Mishimoto intercooler and a Mishimoto oil cooler. So tell me about those lines and fittings. They don't look to be AN lines, but they look to be some sort of push lock, or I don't know what I'm looking at. You're the engineer, so tell me about this.
They're a JIC industrial, like they're Parker industrial hydraulic line. So they're all oil rated, especially for the oil cooler, oil system. The oil cooler is a little small. I've actually fabricated a dual pass that's much bigger. I've yet to put that in, but the Mishi intercooler was an old one I had. I lobbed the end tanks off and then made my own end tanks to kind of just flow with the engine bay a little better, so I didn't have big snaking lines. Besides that, pretty much all the hoses on this car are Parker industrial like fittings.
Is there a reason that you went with Parker Industrial? I've actually never even heard of Parker Industrial, but is there a reason that you went with them instead of like Vibrant or Grassroots Performance or any of the other local, more car-oriented brands?
Honestly, it was a cost thing. I can go to the local hydraulic shop, which actually helps me out. He's a big car guy, has like some very nice show cars. So he started helping me out when I did my SR swapped RX-7, and that's kind of where it started. And so he helps me out big time on like all the fittings, everything else, and used to actually let me use the shop before I had something of my own.
So if there's anything to learn from this, it's be nice to your local hydraulics guy.
Yeah, I guess so. But he has to be a hot rodder.
Okay, so obviously this thing rips. I was watching it go pretty sideways and pretty heavy into that corner, and then again into that corner, and then into that corner over there. And it just kind of seems like this wagon, no matter how hard you try, cannot spin out. So tell me a bit about the angle kit, the setup. I know we can kind of see it through here. So
it's we had talked about it earlier, and it kind of was a little creation of mine because I don't know, I like to always see if I can build something or if I can fabricate it. So it's a custom designed lower control arm, knuckle block, upper camber plate. It's not adjustable, but it relocates. The lollipop is also a custom piece. It's pretty much everything outside the rack is it's a fabricated piece, and each piece relocates all the geometry. To complement like steering bind or over centering or anything like that is common in just doing little tweaks.
So is this like an FD legal angle kit?
Yeah, originally when looking at all the geometry, the big part of the FD legal part would be the top plates. They can't leave the bolt circle, and then the suspension pickup points are an OE location.
Sweet. So I didn't even get into this earlier, but behind this 2JZ, what kind of transmission is it? Is it an R154, W58, or I know it's getting popular as a BMW ZF transmission swap. So let me know what you've got going on back there.
Yeah, so it's a Polish adapter to a Beamer ZF. So it'd be an E36 M3 328 gearbox. I could have run an E46 ZF as well, but I had one.
Not bad. Well, let's just go to the back, take a look at this rad, and then take it for a session. All right, so here we are at the back of this weird wagon. Before I even open this trunk, I want to take a look at some of these stickers. I see that there are a lot here, so I'll only get into a couple. Tell me about GT Custom Exhaust, man.
So GT Custom, Mike Cattell, good friend of mine, known him quite a few years. He did all the major exhaust underwork, so anything underneath the car. I hate laying on my back, and I really don't like doing exhaust work. But it is way fancier than I anticipated.
And I know inside the car you mentioned that Mitchy Speed Shop did a bunch of work to this. So what exactly did Mitch do to the wagon?
Yes, so the cage work was definitely, I give Mitch a lot, like most of the credit for that. But it collaborative and figuring this out for the old backseat kind of deal. Right. The front half of the hoop, that's easy, but the the back half, yes,
It's a little more complicated.
Yeah, it's kind of weird and tying in everywhere, and yeah, it's not as easy as just following a rule book.
So I guess speaking of the back of the car, let's open up the trunk and take a look at exactly what we've got going on back here. So we've got a very nice and even layer of rubber across the whole back of this car. So Drew, tell me a bit about what's going on here. Tell me about your rad, this battery box, these tubes. Those don't look like factory frame rails. I could start pointing shit out, man, but I want to let you talk.
The weirdest part of this whole car was that I had to maintain the wagon aspect to it. So normally I would just lob the car off after like the rear shock points, or I guess it'd be technically the diff. But unfortunately I had a whole lot of extra body work that I had to maintain. But as far as that, kept the body work. There's some serious Bondo pucks in the original quarter panels, so they were replaced. And besides that, you can see the cage kind of integrates back into here, ties in. Actually ties into the diff as well. Battery box, straight up marine battery cover with a liquid fill. Strapped down quite well. Like bolted down, that's just decorative.
Only the best.
Well, yeah. So this is the stock car rad that I was telling you about. It's very run-of-the-mill. It's like a GM orientation of some sort. Lobbed the regular hose fittings off, put a JIC AN. It's the same 37-degree taper fit with the Dash 20 Parker soft lines. Extended water neck and stuff like that I did at home. Same with the overflow. But yeah, as far as all the tubing, it was extended just with 2x4 box tube. There's some kind of bash bars, bumper support kind of deals back there as well. And I guess the more odd, strange piece would be this is my fuel filler.
That's your fuel fill. Oh yeah. True, there's two. Okay, are you running a stock fuel tank in this, or I guess, yeah, you would be running a stock fuel tank.
So the stock fuel cell or fuel tank is a saddle tank, which actually goes over the drive shaft. It's in a good spot. It's underneath the rear seats, so it actually helps with polar moment. So it helps out, and it kept my rad kind of low, so I didn't have a big head differential and like pressure moving the water from front to back of the car. Right. If you put your rad too high, it's going to put a lot more strain on your water pump.
Well, cool. I want to see this thing on track, so looking forward to that. All right, so, we're kind of going to wrap up the interview, and at the end of every single interview, I like to wrap up with a bit of a secret handshake. So me and Drew are going to make one up on the spot, and we're going to figure out, see how this goes.
What is that?
That's the way it goes, dudes.
That was fly.
It's horrible.